Thank you for your patience. We just had to have a brief attorney-client meeting amongst the board members. I would ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and to remain standing to honor all those serving across the world. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Whew. It's hot up. I'm sweating already. Okay. Good evening. I would like to thank everyone for attending the Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting of June 20th, 2018. Before I go any further, I just want to put out, as chairperson of the planning board, I want to thank Chris Schiavelli for his 5 years of service on the planning board. And we do have a new board member, Chris Gerver. But I will introduce all the board members. But thank you, Chris, for your service to the board. Robert Anzalone to my right. To my left, we have Sandra Capriglione, Chris Gerver, Richard Cottaggio, our secretary, Gail Noggle. All the way to the far left, our engineers, Dennis Lindsay, attorney Rick Golden, and John Collins, our traffic consultant. And I'm Maria Hunter, your chairperson. Board members, have you had a chance to review the minutes of May 30th? And if so, do I have a motion to accept?
I make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay. All right, thank you. First item on the agenda, we have Central Valley Property, public hearing for site plan, special permit, and ARB for the proposed construction of a two-story mixed-use building and parking lot expansion. Said property is located at 252 Route 32 in Central Valley and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 230, Block 7, Lots 17 through 19. I'll give the applicant a chance to set up, and I will get my file out. Oh, this thing weighs too much. Good evening.
Good evening. Steve Esposito, Esposito Associates, representing the applicant, and also with me today is Barry Tarrick, architect, and he will cover the architectural review part of the presentation. The project is located at the intersection of Estrada Drive and New York State Route 32. It's on the easterly side.
What do you think?
But most of you may know the site is the TD Bank location. That's the existing structure right here. It's approximately 2,400 square feet, which is currently under renovations. And what we're here tonight is we're proposing a mixed-use building, 2 stories. First story is going to be mixed commercial, 8,600 square feet, with likely uses. It could be restaurant, retail, office. There's a number of permitted uses in the Hamlet Hamlet Business District. The second floor will be residential, consisting of 4 two-bedroom apartments and 4 one-bedroom apartments. There's also expansion of the existing parking lot to accommodate the additional square footage. The site is about 1.5 acres. We're in the Hamlet Business District, and the site is made up of 3 tax parcels, which will remain, and that's about it. We've actually, gone through, been to the ZBA. We received a area variance with regard to lot area. We've concluded the SECRA review process with the planning board as lead agency, and we've been in constant contact with the New York State Department of Transportation under our Perm 33 application, and have just made another application to them. And that's it for the site plan. And just we'll go into the building a little bit.
Steve, can I just ask you a question from the last meeting about that pole?
Yes. Matter of fact, Sandy, when I was leaving, I went there to take a look at that. It's not a service pole. If you look, it's a tie pole. It's connected to the pole that actually has the service to the existing TD Bank, which is right on Route 32. There's 3 steel cables that go from that pole, because that pole, the pole has a transformer on it, and it's also on a bend, on that bend. So there's 3 steel cables with turnbuckles on it, and that is actually like an anchor pole for that pole.
Okay,
So-
so that all is going to stay.
Yeah, I'm guessing O&R is going to want that to stay.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Barry Terrick, Barry Terrick Architects. We're the designers of the building itself. We took a look at the street when we initially designed the building, and obviously the old TD Bank is a fairly prominent structure on that site. We elected to complement the materials on that building. So what we've got here, it's a 2-story building. Both stories on all sides will be a brick, which we chose. It's very close to the match of the bank building. Readily available. These are just half-inch slices, but it'll be a full-size brick. And all these finishes are specified on the submitted finish sheet. These are all a match. So I have nowhere to really leave it. But so we have that brick. The details in the brick building will be complemented with this color. It's actually a precast limestone, and we're looking at water table lines here and up at the top. So, and this is also very close to the detail, to the color that's on the TD Bank building for all their detailing. For the windows and the majority of the storefront, I know it's kind of a pretty straightforward situation, but we're basically looking at a black, it's a black aluminum frame. All the windows will be done that way. On the second floor apartments also. And then we have a dark ivy green that we're using to accentuate the front doors on the businesses. So black is the color that's, if you know, that's the windows and the doors on the bank also. So this really was set up to complement the bank building.
Steve, you did submit the ARB sheet? I can't find it. When
Want that?
do you know approximately when you submitted it, so I can go back on my paperwork?
It was a while back,
I was gonna say, what's the
Yeah,
date at the bottom? Is there a date on it? No?
A long time ago.
A long time ago?
November 16th,
Okay.
November 2016.
All right, you can get, then I know where to find it. Okay, you can have, all right, thank you. So all those styles and everything's staying the same. All right, if you can give that to Rick at least, so he has it, because I will find it in a few moments. Thank you. I knew it was a while. All right, board members, the colors that were shown with the brick and the stone and around the windows, we're all okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm good with that. And Rick, you have the names and styles and everything?
I do.
Okay. I'll find it when I go home. All right, anything else that you want to, Barry, about the building?
I think if there are any questions, otherwise I think we've got it.
Okay, I'm going to go through my consultants, and because it's a public hearing, then I'll take it from there. Dennis, do you have any comments about, actually?
Just a very few.
Okay.
And that is that we have submitted some memoranda to you regarding our comments. The applicant has not yet addressed those comments, waiting for the public hearing to see if there are any further comments, I believe, and then they'll submit a plan. Most of the items that we had were technical in nature and ones that they could go down as a checklist and modify the plans. I believe that we've only received one set of architectural drawings. These were submitted a way back. They're not dated, though. So I think we should get some copy with a date on it, so Rick can reference it in the resolution, and Gary would know that that's the appropriate
Should we use
plan.
today's date?
We can use today's date or something, but something should have your date on it, I think, for the file.
Okay.
And that's all I have, unless you have any questions. It's an opportunity to hear from the public.
Okay. Rick, thoughts, concerns, questions for us, or?
No.
John, you have a microphone? I know you have some questions. We have a report that was submitted to us from Mazer on June 13th for our traffic, and I'm sure you're going to
Yes.
discuss it.
The report that I submitted was basically, I had asked the applicant's engineer, traffic engineer, to prepare an analysis with the hotel traffic. We discussed it at the last meeting. This is just a formalization of that for the record. The board also asked me to check with DOT because it seemed that the signals were not working properly at either Estrada or on Smithclove. What we did check with them. They were going to send out a crew. I've attached an email from the state DOT indicating the same, that they will look at it. And I asked a question about how to improve the operation so it doesn't keep on going out of sync. They came back with several comments, and the low-cost version that would get you about 75% efficiency and make sure that they tie in is to install a modem in each of the cabinets in order that the two signals could continue to be coordinated in case they lose power and then something happens. So that's always an option for the board. The state gave a cost of about $5,000, knowing how the state underestimates and finds that I'm looking at about $7,500 per installation. That's fully installed in the box. And that's for the information of the board.
Okay, thank you. Board members, do you have any questions, or you want to hear from the public first?
I have a question.
Okay.
John, in the report from the state, it said something about a PED button. Is that a pedestrian button?
A PED button is a pedestrian button, and sometimes when you push it in, it gets stuck, and then it keeps on doing a recall, because as if it's continuing to be pressed, okay? So what happens is they have to go out and make sure that that didn't happen, or to see what happened with the signal. I haven't had a report back from the state since my conversation with them. I expect to have that either this week or next week. But I wanted to get their attention about their signal people going out.
And they mentioned that an adaptive light could cost between the simple version, $5,000, up to $100,000. What would
Yeah.
you get for $5,000?
Well, $5,700 would be the modem that basically lets the two signals continue to talk to one another, so to speak. The other one are the smart signals, the type of signals that are being installed as part of the interchange plan. They would cost significantly much more. The state felt, and I feel, that it's easier to get close to 75% efficiency since the loops are there, et cetera, and it's not an onerous cost for someone, okay?
So the lower end, you feel is satisfactory?
I feel
then?
satisfied that you're going to need that in the upper end anyway, so you're not going to be wasting any money. So it would be a situation, you would put it in, you would probably increase the efficiency some 60, 70%.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy?
I have to take this opportunity to thank the state for a speedy response.
We can hear from the public, and then we can see if they have anything new. All right. Chris, you have anything you want to ask before we go out to the public?
The traffic study was done during the summer in 2017? Was there one that was a study that reflects?
There was a traffic study done by the applicant in 2017. We had questions about that study because the counts. The applicant did a reevaluation with additional counts. They submitted it to the board, we reviewed that. It showed that there was a different operating conditions, but still the comparison between what is called a no build and no build condition would be satisfactory. And the last iteration of the analysis was because of the hotel that's going to be could be located with the board's approval on Estrada. We wanted to make sure that that traffic volume was also factored in, and they agreed to do it and submitted that. So there was 3 studies, one in the summer, the time is outdated, and then we had them do counts. As I suspected, the counts were higher, and then they reevaluated, et cetera. So we've had all the information in front of us.
Because the reason I asked the question is during the school year, there's a number of buses that come down Estrada.
That's exactly what we had. Not only that, is the base volume on 32 and Estrada are different.
Right, and the question I'm going with is typically those buses get stopped at that intersection and traffic builds behind them. I
Right.
saw on the plans there's an entrance into the proposed.
There is-
So you're going to potentially block traffic on making the right off of 32 because you're going to be trying to make the left with the
There's-
entrance in that
okay,
way.
My recommendation to the board is that and the applicant has agreed, to restrict left turns into that driveway to Estrada during the morning peak hour between 7 and 9. So there would be no left turn allowed from Estrada into the site, thereby avoiding that situation of getting vehicles queued, be they school buses or passenger cars, blocking the entrance to the driveway and therefore backing up onto 32. So the left turn would be restricted from Estrada in. And I think that's noted on the plan, Steve?
Yes,
That note is on the plan, on the site plan.
I believe it is, but we have agreed to it.
Microphone, please. I'm tough
I
today.
know we did agree to that in our, I think, our last letter to the board, so we have no problem with that. And of course, you can make that a condition of the approval.
Anything? Oh, Rick is going to speak.
Yeah, I think that's something that typically is on the plans. Yeah, I think it's more appropriate to be on the plans itself as a note for Gary to be looking over rather than a condition in the resolution. So if you could include it in the plans, we may also put it in the resolution, but I think it really needs to be a note in the plans.
Thank you. Anything else, Chris? Rich? Okay. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to have a seat since this is a public hearing. Okay. This was published on Friday, June 15th in the Times Herald Record. Notice is hereby given that the Village of Woodbury Planning Board will hold a public hearing at 7:30 PM on Wednesday, June 20th, 2018, at Woodbury Town Hall, 511 Route 32, Highland Mills, New York, in the matter of the application of Central Valley Property Management for site plan, special permit, and ARB for the proposed construction of a two-story mixed-use building and parking lot expansion. Said property is located at 252 Route 32 in Central Valley and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as Section 230, Block 7, Lots 17 through 19. With that being said, I know we have some new faces in the audience. Usually I go row by row, and I ask that anyone who gets up to speak, that you direct all your concerns and questions to the board members, and then we take notes, and then we'll get some answers as we go along. Anyone in the first row? And when you do come up, you need to state your name and your address. Anyone in the second row? Anyone in the third row? Anyone in the fourth row? Please step up to the podium and use the microphone, please. It should be green light on.
My name is Felicita Ferrara. I think I'm getting the hang of this, but I just want to clarify. So tonight, the agenda is only supposed to be, according to on the agenda, the parking lot. That's what it said on the agenda online. But I'm confused because he's showing you the front of the building and the materials and stuff.
What's written on the agenda is public hearing for site plan, special permit, and ARB for the proposed construction of a two-story mixed-use building and parking lot expansion.
Okay, so it's all of that.
It's all of it.
So I just want to clarify again. So I can address all my concerns, or am I only addressing the
Everything.
concern?
Anything you want.
Everything.
This
This is my time, of course, when I don't have my notes with all my iPads.
No problem. That's,
But,
we'll take it slow.
all
It's
right.
okay.
All right,
Anything- yeah.
so I'm going to state that I live on the lower road on Two Schoolhouse Road,
Yep.
which the TD North Bank has a little small lot of grass on that road, and then I can see TD North Bank and the parking lot. I love the front of this structure. That looks beautiful. My concerns are what my view is going to be when I get out of my house. I'm concerned about where the dumpsters are going to be located. I'm concerned about the snow removal and how the water is going to drain down, because as it is, water goes down to our level. I'm concerned about as far as what barrier is going to be around, because right now we just have a metal, looks like a highway divider that is see-through and you can climb over. So I'm wondering what's going to be the back view. I think on one of the meetings, they said they were going to put a fence, and he said the maximum that they asked for was, I think, under 6 feet. I'm concerned that if a car is parked, it goes into drive, it would go right through a fence. I think there should be some kind of concrete barrier, especially because there's houses and kids on that road, that if a car goes down, one of the kids can get injured. One of my other concerns was the lights in the parking lot. How bright are the lights going to be? As it is, the lights shine into our houses. So I'm concerned with building a taller structure. What is the lighting going to be in the parking lot? How bright is it going to be? What time are the lights going to be on timers? I'm concerned about the traffic going in and out. As far as if there's going to be residents that living in this place, then if they have kids and their kids are parked and they're walking with their kids into their residence, and you have a place where you can go into 32 and cut out of a strata to beat a light, people are going to do that. They do that now across the road near Smith Clove Road and the school. They constantly cut off 32, go through our school, the little side, even though it says you can't go through, and then go down Valley. So I feel like we're going to have the same situation when people are on 32. They're going to cut into the parking lot, speed through, and cut out through Estrada. Estrada, the traffic is already very heavy. I know that you addressed it with the lights. The lights are always out of sync. The school buses are an issue in the morning. When 32 gets backed up, all the traffic then goes on to Valley. And then Estrada's backed up, Valley's backed up. I'm a school teacher there. My daughter's bus stop is at 7:40. I can tell you there are times where I say, all right, let's go, let's just walk, because your bus is still not here. And I'll get to the school, and it's 8:10, and the buses are all behind. Because if 32 is behind, the buses are behind. I'm concerned with the delivery trucks. As it is on the Sunoco gas station, the delivery trucks block the road, and you can't get through, in and out, and through. So I'm concerned with the size of the delivery trucks. I know that they addressed it and they said, well, we think it's just going to be FedEx sizes. If you don't know who your tenants are, then I don't understand how they can suggest that the delivery trucks are only going to be the size of small FedEx or box trucks. If you don't know who your tenants are, then you don't know what deliveries they're going to have, therefore you don't know what trucks they're going to be using. I'm concerned that, if you're getting off on a strata and you have a big truck, you're blocking the road. You're blocking the road and you're causing all the backup. Trying to think of any other concerns. I think I addressed the lighting, the parking. I don't think there's enough parking there for what they're asking for. And I think that's it. And noise control, as far as if there's going to be a restaurant, there was talk about a restaurant. What are these hours of this restaurant? This is a residential area, and now you're putting a restaurant. How late are these restaurants going to stay open? Again, the parking, if you don't know what kind of restaurant's going to be there, then how do you know how much parking it's going to generate? I mean, everyone loves Cosmos. And before Cosmos, I don't know where anyone in this town ate, because you can't find a parking space anywhere near Cosmos. And obviously that came across the board and everyone thought there would be enough parking there. And if anyone looks, there is not enough parking there. So I just don't understand how all these decisions they're saying is going to happen when they don't know their tenants yet. And that's basically all my concerns.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. We'll get back to you on some of these, or most of them. Anyone else in the last row that wants to speak on this application? Are you here for the public hearing for Central Valley Properties, sir? Okay. Is there anyone at all in this room that wants to speak on this public hearing? Going once, going twice? Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Steve, Barry, come back up, please. I'm going to go down the list, and I'm going to have you answer as I furiously was writing.
Okay, I got them up here. You
Good.
go ahead.
The view,
The view.
yes.
So right now you have, this is all an existing parking lot. This is the existing building, so
Just bring the microphone a little closer.
our
please.
expansion is going to be in this direction, to the south. All right, we're actually going to be cleaning the edge of this parking lot up. It's going to be curbed. We're expanding the stormwater collection system within the parking lot. Everything, and your engineer has gone through this, it's all positively drained. Curbing is going to right now, there is no curbing, so, the water probably does run, from, west to east. It kind of slopes all this direction. We're now going to put a curb along around the entire parking lot and have a state-of-the-art storm collection system. We're going to be providing stormwater quality and stormwater, storage as well.
Dumpsters.
Dumpsters, one here and one here.
The one behind the former TD Bank, that was located there before, right?
That- Correct,
That one
that's
was there.
approximately the same
Right.
location.
So
And
the
so what we
new one
did,
is-
we added
okay.
one in the corner here.
Now, I know in prior applications, we always ask that the dumpsters are enclosed, and,
We have an enclosure, that detail is on the plans.
Right, and that we, as a condition of the resolution, it's always stated that the dumpsters must be kept in a clean and, what's the word I'm looking for?
Appropriate.
Thank you. That if there's anything broken, that the applicant is, the owner is required to maintain it in a decent situation. Snow removal.
Snow removal, we're, like any parking lot, it's going to be plowed, sometimes depending on the accumulation. Some of it may need to be loaded out. We are slating this area here, the lawn area, is some snow storage area. We also have a couple small snow storage areas along Estrada. But as any property owner, they're required to maintain it in accordance with local code.
Okay. Drainage, you said we're working on that. The barriers that are currently up at the top, you said you're going to be putting curbing in.
Yeah, right now there's an existing, and it's a steel corrugated guardrail. It's a little rusty, and as we stated earlier, we're going to clean that off, and it's going to be renovated along with all the other renovations. It's structurally, it's sound, so that's going to remain through this whole portion here. It's going to go up to about this point here. This whole periphery of the parking lot is going to have curbing as well.
Curbing, is that concrete curbing?
Concrete curbing,
Concrete,
correct,
okay.
and, landscaping and everything else. There was a question about the fence. We are proposing, as in accordance with the code, a 6-foot, 6-inch white spruce fence that is along the perimeter of the property line, which is required because we're abutting a residential zone.
And that's the lower end of below the parking lot?
Correct.
As
It's
it slopes down?
along the perimeter.
Okay, along the perimeter,
Yeah.
all right. Barriers, the lights.
The lights have been designed, they're sharp cutoff, and they've been reviewed by your engineer. We do meet the sharp cutoff requirements of the code, with the exception of two small isolated areas, and those are both the entrance onto 32 and the entrance onto Estrada. We're about 0.2 foot candles at that location. Our position was, we think it's an appropriate trespass of light because those are the intersections and they should be well lit. And I believe that your consultant conferred that.
Okay. We go to the next easy one, not enough parking.
Parking, as the request of the board, we had prepared a parking analysis. Again, just to let you know, this is a mixed-use facility. So you're going to have, each of the different uses are going to have different peaks. But basically, we looked at the analysis, looked at identifying when the peaks would occur and what the demand in parking would be. And your traffic consultant concurred with our traffic consultant that the proposed spaces are adequate to meet the peak. The peak day is like one day in December in the week, and actually both of them, I believe, are in December on weekend and midweek peak.
Okay. Delivery trucks.
We're in a village. We do a lot of work in villages. We are proposing a loading zone here. This loading zone dimensionally is designed and will be constructed in accordance with the dimensions in your code. We've had a lot of discussion about this, and we feel that it's adequate to get truck deliveries. We also think that we don't know our tenants. That's going to be market demand, but this is not an unusual thing to be to construct a building under speculation. But we've identified in our site plan what we think are going to be the percentages of a restaurant, percentages of office, percentages of retail. We've identified what the parking needs for those square footages, and we think that the loading zone will be more than adequate to meet the needs for that service.
Okay. Noise control at restaurants, possible restaurant.
We have to function under your code.
Code.
All right?
Okay.
It's a slippery slope when we start talking about that.
Because I do know we, from prior experience, we can't tell you when to have a business that's open.
Like I said, it's a slippery slope.
Yep. Okay, I think the last thing is the big white elephant, the traffic.
Well, I can tell you that, if you want, we received a memorandum from Mazer, your traffic consultant, back in April 2018, where there were 4 bullets. 3 of the bullets basically identified that there are no significant impacts to those items that were in question. We've also had all of our analysis, all 3 of them, actually the 2. The third one was just recently done at the request of the board by the DOT as well. And you've gotten copies of their comments and our responses back to their comment. And basically, it's the opinion of our consultant. I believe your consultant concurred that although there is a lot of traffic there, we're a drop in a bucket. And we do intend to comply with John's recommendation about limiting left-hand turns off of Estrada in the AM hours, and we will make sure that that's on the plan.
Okay. What John mentioned earlier about these modems with adaptive lights, I'm not sure how we're going to approach that, because you're not the only applicant that's going to impact this intersection, with the potential to impact this.
Maria, in all honesty,
I haven't even talked about it yet.
Right, I haven't seen the memos. I really don't know. This is the first
Yeah.
I've heard of it, so I really don't know,
Like
and
yeah.
I can't respond to that.
I know that, so this is something that we have to review once we get the reports in on that, and the board members, it's the first they're hearing it as well. So that's something that we have to consider and look at once we get the reports in. I think we answered all the questions so far from your point of view. And I know this is going back and forth within the plans and memos. Dennis, did I miss anything, or?
Well, the only thing I just note for the board, although they don't know the tenants, if you act on the plan as it's presented, it will have some limitations on some of the uses. The restaurant use has a greater parking requirement than a retail use. So they've designated or said that they would have up to 1,479 square feet, I think. Yes, of restaurant space. They can have no more. They could have less, but they can have no more of that. That's independent of your decision whether you think the waiver that they've requested is appropriate. The code says 80 spaces according to all those uses. Their argument is, and which John reviewed, is that the peaks of those uses, though, aren't they don't coincide, and so they're requesting that 66 spaces be permitted so you don't over park the place if you have too much parking in the location. So that's their request, but you do have some limitations from this action. There would be some limitations on what they could have in uses.
So Rick, excuse me, or Dennis or Rick, so as far as the restaurant goes, because that does require greater parking, will that 1,400 be a condition?
It's on the site plan. I don't know if Rick would think it appropriate to put it in the resolution as well, but it's on the site plan.
Because I
and
remember
limits
when
it.
they first started, and I had reservations about that, and I think, Steve, you had said whatever the market is drawing, you're going to put in there. So if, say, 2 restaurants wanted to come in, now all of a sudden that parking formula goes out the window.
Well, not really. It doesn't. And the reason why we got our crystal ball out, and we took our best guess on what we think would be. We think that there would probably the potential of having 1 small restaurant in there, and we picked a number. We identified a number and used that in our analysis for both traffic, parking, water usage, sewer generation, and if that number goes up, then something's got to give. And that's why we have those percentages on the plan.
Okay, but worst case scenario, and again, it's anybody's crystal ball at this point, but what if that whole bottom floor,
At
What if-
this point, we're only approving 14,700,
1,400?
1,400, excuse me, I said 14,000, 1,400 square footage. If they,
We
They
would,
can't
we would
do-
have
they
to
can't-
come,
they
Gary
can't-
would send us back to the board. That would be
Yeah.
an amendment to this approved plan.
What's the total bedroom count on the apartments above?
4 2-bedrooms and 4 1-bedrooms.
So there's a potential that every one of those bedrooms is a driver. So at any given time, those spots could be taken in that lot. So wouldn't that take away from the available spots that they have used based on?
Dennis, the calculations.
Calculations
Did you
are on
get
the
this
front
map? You
sheet.
didn't get this map, did you?
I'm the new guy, sorry.
Yeah, so that's okay. No, you have to be, here, these are where are the calculations on here?
It includes all of the uses and the required, the code has certain requirements for parking for a particular use, either by square footage for retail or by, if it's a residential unit, then there's 2 spaces or whatever it might be per unit. And then when they total up all of the particular uses that they have here and the areas assigned to those uses, they come up with a total requirement. That total requirement is 80 spaces. It includes 1,479 square feet of restaurant. If they change that 1,479 to say 1,600, it would change the mix, it would increase that number. They're not permitted to do that. So their limitation is 1,479. I think that if they went to the building department, they didn't have a restaurant use and they wanted to put that use in as a retail use, I don't think there would be any prohibition on that. Because I think it's just up to the retail. I'm looking at you, Rick, I'm not sure. But I don't think there would be any limitation because that would have a lesser requirement on parking. But if they wanted to increase the restaurant use, they would have to come back. Now, the board only has authority to reduce the parking by a certain amount. If they wanted to exceed parking or exceed the restaurant use or any other use by a different use that requires more parking and that exceeded your ability to provide for a reduction, they couldn't come back to this board. They would have to be referred to the ZBA for a variance. And I'm sure Rick will tell me if I've misspoken on anything.
You can have this, I'll do it, but that's at the top corner, it has the breakdown of what the code requests, what needs to be done and what they're going to do, and it has the breakdown. And this is something the board has to decide, or whether or not we accept the 66. We have to make a decision if we feel that that's,
Right, and that's what I'm getting at. My only
Yeah.
concern is that if everybody in those apartments is a driver,
so there's 8 apartments, they're saying 16, if you look at
Yeah.
them, they have to provide 16 parking spots for those apartments.
right, so they're already short, they require 80, they're gonna take 16 away if everybody's home and they're already short, so now you're even shorter for spots.
Understood,
Okay.
yep. So that's something the board, once we get all our information together, we'd have to figure out how we're going to address that. Rick, do you have any comments before I go to the board members for any additional information they want to know?
Well, I mean, at some point in time, I would like to sort of get the board's feel, if you are going to ask to authorize me to draft a resolution. I have some potential conditions picking up on the discussions this evening, and I need to know if there are any others. And as you just noted, we also need to determine whether or not the board is going to be granting that waiver with respect to reducing the parking as permitted but not required by the code.
Okay. All right, Robert, thoughts, concerns?
Yeah, the number of residents, you said 16 parking spaces, but they're not assigned, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so they would park wherever
Correct.
spaces are available.
Well, if you remember, Robert, what we did do is adjacent to the building, we were limiting those spaces for 2-hour parking. We're going to approach the town board under Article 39 to allow for, the police department to, police the parking like many other commercial establishments in the village.
Okay, thank you.
Anything
That's
else?
it, that's it.
Okay,
yeah.
Sandy, you have anything else that you want to?
No, I just like, I'm really concerned about the limitation on that parking as far as the unknowns of the tenants. But I guess we'll cross that when we.
Well, we'll have to discuss
Yeah.
it. We have to do it sooner than later. Chris, anything additional?
Just the flow on the 32, I see that between the loading dock and the fire lane, that's in and out. Again, a concern I would have, and I would agree with the resident that spoke, that people are gonna try to make that left out of the parking lot onto 32. And you're gonna, potentially, they're gonna inch, because it's a limited site coming out, they're gonna inch their car out, they're gonna block the traffic on the 32, which is gonna jam up both sides. I personally, perfect world, if it was me, I'd like to see the entrance off of 32, only in on 32 and out on Estrada, kind of make the circle. So you can't, they can't make that left on the 32, and they're being forced to come out onto Estrada. And the exit on Estrada be made into the curb cut that only allows you to make the right, so you can't make the left into the neighborhood and drive down the blocks and avoid the light like everybody's talking about. Depending on what goes in there, say a Dunkin' Donuts or something goes in there, there's a potential for a high volume of traffic going in and out in a circle, and a lot of cars trying to come up 32. And, your police department, ambulance, fire are all located downstream of this building. So if cars are, that neck of the woods during rush hour, from anybody that lives here knows it's a hard stretch to get through. Now you have a car or something trying to make a left, it blocks traffic even further. Now you're delaying emergency services from getting down to the side. That would be my only other concern.
With that being said, I know I've expressed a feeling that the egress, leaving on 32 would be a right-hand turn only. And we know we can put multiple signs up and put curbings, and people are still going to make a turn that they're not supposed to. Case in point would be from Mar Lane onto Larkin Drive. You're not supposed to make a left-hand turn, but they still do it anyway. We can only ask that the signs be put up by the applicant. We can ask John to say, is this feasible? That we don't want any left-hand turns from onto 32 by the bank entrance. So we can request that. I know that was something I asked from a while back. Anything else? Rich?
No, I'm good. I got the same concerns about the number of parking spaces.
All right. Well, let's talk about the parking spaces. The parking spaces, they're looking for a reduction of 14 parking spaces we can allow it, we can vote on that and say, yes, we can reduce the parking spaces, but then we don't know what is going to go into the building. We can ask that the building footprint get reduced. So instead of 8 apartments, it might be 6 apartments or 8 one-bedroom apartments. We can, that's something that we really haven't discussed as a board. So I'm putting it out there. If you feel the parking is, you don't want to reduce the parking, give me some suggestions for the applicant, and we have to do it now than later. Robert?
Can we get by with 70 parking spots? Just add another 4 to what you want?
Well, just, to remind the board, one is, and I probably should have started off my presentation like this, and of course Stu's not here tonight, but, as your planner, he identified this project as implementing the comprehensive plan. It is exactly what the plan wants for the Hamlet business districts. It's our request of reducing the number of spaces is consistent with today's planning. That's why that reduction by this board up to 25% of the required parking is in there. You adopted this in 2011, and that was considered during that process. There's also 3 off-street parking spaces right adjacent to the TD Bank building. It's really 69 spaces, 66 on, 3 off. We could look to squeeze another 1 or 2 in there, but that's it. You've asked us to do an analysis. We've done an analysis based on, industry standards. Your consultant has reviewed it. He's concurred with our findings. And for the 1 day out of the year, we have adequate parking. Those other 300 and whatever days of the year, we're going to have more than enough parking based on the current program that is going to be part of the approved plans.
Okay.
Yeah. I can throw a case in point. If you're going northbound at the intersection of 32 and Smith Clove, the strip mall that's up to the left there are times you cannot find a parking spot in there. But people make do. They go into the other little side parking lot that's there. And it's not to say that the little parking lot that's off to the side that the state put in a couple years ago, people can park there and they can walk to this proposed building. There is availability of other off-site parking. So we've got to come up with a balance here.
But that's the thing, with this building, there's residential usage. So, I mean, if something is so popular that it's gonna put out residents as far as their parking,
Well, the residents
then
would,
what happens?
the residents would have to go to the property owner and say, hey, we need to have X amount, those 16 spots that are slated for residential parking, we may have to have them
But that's,
marked. We may have
that's
to
what
have them
I
marked.
would like to see, designated parking for the residents, because, again,
And they
without,
would have to be, to me, they wouldn't be up to the building, they would have to be towards the back. And I'm not sure how the applicant would like to do that
Well, I
with
think that's
assigned
what they were
parking.
thinking anyway.
We can assign parking, and when we prefer not to do that because because of the use, the peaks of the different uses, you're going to be, during the day, there's going to be however many parking spaces you want us to designate for residences not being able to be used for commercial traffic. The idea is that those people, particularly the one bedrooms, that's, will likely be working. And when the office or the retail, establishments are open, 9 to 5, those number of spaces become unavailable. So it's, if you think that would help mitigate the issue, then we would be more than happy to do it, but just like to warn you, we'd like to keep the flexibility. We thought limiting parking times was a better alternative, but we can do it.
I mean, it'd be a 2-hour parking by the building, which the residents would know they couldn't park there. Reduction of 14. I'm just trying, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12. If we did 12, 10 to 12 assigned parking, maybe, for the residents in the back, I don't know. I need input from the board. You got to talk to me. Now's the time.
Is there any property rights to the north of the bank where it's between Central Valley Liquors,
Hold
the
on a second.
Crossfoot?
Hold on a second, she's got it.
Yeah.
No, that's
Okay.
Robert, that's there's an existing, it's privately owned.
It's private.
There's and there's actually physically, there's a little bit of a dip to go down to that
Yeah,
existing
there
parking
is,
lot.
yes.
Yeah,
Three
that
or-
parking to the north of the building is for the liquor store and for the exercise place down below.
So that's
Yeah,
off
so
limits.
that's
Okay.
off limits.
All right.
But Maria made a good point also, is you do have a municipal parking lot or a state parking lot, almost across, just down the street, a couple of 100 feet from this facility as well.
So, Rich, your thoughts about parking? Come on, board members, you gotta give me something here.
Yeah, I was thinking of the number 72, but I'm just trying to see if you can rearrange either the island or the entrance or the dumpster, but I don't see where an alternative would be. 'Cause the bank shares the same parking, correct?
Correct.
It's all gonna be, it's all gonna be
It's all
one
one.
lot, Rich.
Our calculation or analysis was based on the TD Bank square footage and the proposed square footage. So, and that's the cumulative number of required parking is for both buildings.
And no other configuration was looked at, or there is no other configuration that you can do?
We went through a whole bunch of configurations. Dennis just pointed out that we possibly could look at getting a couple of spaces, down along the westerly side or easterly side of the entrance to Estrada. I mean, what I would suggest is, but there's a setback for parking from a property, offset from a residential district, so that would require a variance.
That island that's closest to where the old bank building is, in the middle there?
Yep.
That is an island that we put there for landscaping.
Correct, because your code requires landscaping.
Could we possibly take that out and put the landscaping on the back hill? Or do we need to have that there for directional purposes? Because, the only reason I'm asking is because,
We need something for circulation purposes. I mean, maybe we could get, I mean, you either put the island in or take it out. Because if you want to put half an island in there, because it's just going to be, people will be popping their tires on it. So,
well, yeah, because what I'm getting at is, I've seen places with islands and they cause problems with snow removal. because you have to remember where the island is, so you don't kill it, you don't kill the plants the trees that are in there. So how does the board members feel about removing that island and just having it heavily striped on the ground?
Now, you're talking about where the Vanetton house used to be.
No,
No.
show them where I'm talking about, right there. It's right off the back corner of the bank.
Okay, all right.
Because right now, when that bank operated, that island wasn't
Right,
there.
right.
And how
People
much more
knew
is
to
that gonna
drive,
give them?
to drive around it.
Right, right.
Is it,
You might get 3 spaces out of that?
You
But-
might be able to get 3 spaces, and you have the 3 in the front, and you maybe might get 1 or 2 on the other side. So maybe we've increased it by 5 within.
Maria, might I make a suggestion?
Yes, John?
I think what we do is, the site plan operates properly. I think what Steve could do is indicate on a plan, reserve parking that would be built in case it's needed. So for example, with respect to the island, if the board decides, or somebody in the village decides that there's an additional parking needed in the site, the plan would have identified locations, potential locations. It's almost like a land banking.
Right, because,
So if we can
Shadow
land bank
parking.
5 or 6 spaces, that the board can say, well, we need those 5 spaces, let's build them, and you can do it. Secondly, I think there should be, because of the residents, and at least to protect the residents, while there's a requirement of 2 spaces per unit, I think you could reserve on the outer fringes 8 spaces, 1 per unit, for residents only. In other words, that would be reserved, and then the other extra parking space could be built. They would have to look within the parking area for the second space. I think the board should also make a requirement that there should be no off-street parking, or on-street parking, and that all deliveries have to be on the property. So, for example, if the loading zone is occupied, and a vehicle comes in to make a delivery, it has to make the delivery inside the site as opposed to on the public street. And lastly, I think the board should reserve the right to restrict left turns out of the driveway to Estrada based upon the operation. So, for example, it finds out it's problematic, 2 or 3 years down the line, the board can say, okay, we're going to impose right turn only in that driveway.
Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to prohibit parking, off-street parking, because they do have 3 spots in front of the bank on 32. That's,
Except for those, okay.
okay, all right, I just want to make sure.
Except for those, right.
Okay.
But
And
those would be my suggestion.
Okay.
I think it gets additional parking without changing the plan, makes it future if need be.
Right.
I think it helps the residents because they know they got at least 1 space per unit reserved. I think it gives the board the ability to modify the conditions of the driveway in the future if it turns out to be problematic. And I think those are the assurances you can get, the best assurance you can get with the plan. And it's almost, if a restaurant doesn't have the parking on site, they're not going to come in as a restaurant.
Right.
That's what I find. So those are my suggestions, and purely my suggestions.
No, I agree with your suggestions. I mean, Dennis, we've talked about shadow parking in the past. If we could possibly get 5 more spots with shadow parking, can the applicant, Steve, show this to us on the map? You'll probably draw something up and let us know?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Or yes, we will, I think.
Yes, you will. And you're also going to show someplace where you're going to maybe, board members, are you okay with having 8?
if 8 are
Reserved?
designated, I would be okay with that.
8?
I'm good, yes.
Do you have a preference
A preference of,
of locating those 8 restricted? I mean, that's a reasonable number, it's 8 units, you know, and I think
I
that.
I would ask closer to
as
Estrada.
close to
So-
Yeah, the 30-year rod setback, 30-yard setback.
I would say somewhere in there so
Here or
that it,
here?
I'd say closer to the building.
I say closer to the building by where the.
Okay.
I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're going to adjust this with shadow parking, you're gonna have 8 parking spaces
Reserved.
reserved. The no left-hand turn from,
Estrada Drive.
okay. And does the board want from 32, where the entrance is off of 32, north of Estrada, do you want that? Do we want to request that, no left-hand turn onto 30? Because I know the state said they were okay with it.
We've reviewed that with the DOT,
they
and
said
they
they were
are
fine.
okay with that, based on the
Yeah.
improvements that they made at the intersection,
Because there's that third lane,
because you
the
have the
middle
third
lane.
lane, and
So
they were,
the- so the
they were
state
fine
said,
with it.
I think there's reality versus what is
because
statistical.
we could put all the signs that we want up there, and people aren't gonna listen to it.
No, but at least
It's a
it
deterrent.
becomes an enforcement.
Right, and
It's
who's gonna,
supposed to be an enforcement.
see, now, we're a village, we can't tell the town to enforce it, because it's town police. You see where I'm going with that?
Because I was also gonna ask, the entrance on Estrada, can we request that become a hash, a box? So they can't, so the traffic can't block that box.
We can have the applicant try to do that, because we've tried to do that with Woodbury Common, we can't get, don't block the box. Who's raising their hand?
Yeah, I
Oh.
would not recommend don't block the box type of situation. We're restricting during this key peak hours.
Can you bring the
7 a.m.
microphone a little closer, please?
7 a.m. to 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. We're restricting left turns from Estrada into the site, such that any queuing that develops by school bus, et cetera, going out of Estrada onto 32, blocking the driveway would not stop vehicles from coming into the site, thereby backing up onto 32 and everything else. If you don't block the box, it becomes an enforcement, it becomes a nightmare, and the fact is then you live with it 24/7. That's the problem. And then you got additional timings, et cetera. That's my problem with the.
And for the most part, I think if someone's on Route 32, whether they're going north or south, I would go in through closest to the bank instead of coming onto Estrada. So I think that kind of might mitigate some of that.
Just be okay with the no left-hand turn
Okay,
out of,
all right,
On
so
the
we can have,
32.
Rick, you here, I guess it has to be on the map, so it's
but that
better.
would be a 24/7, the no left turn, out onto 32, right? Not during peak hours?
We're saying peak hours.
No, that's the Estrada, I'm talking
He's
coming
talking about
from
left on to 32.
left on 32 from between the loading and the back.
Do you want to go against the state, what they said? You know, we've had New
I
York
think,
State, I don't,
the state has already made a determination that they're going to permit full movements of that driveway. That allows the town, a village, a little bit more flexibility on restricting its access to Estrada, which is beneficial. I think if it turns out to be a situation that people find it difficult making a left turn out, it's easy enough to go to Estrada, make a right turn, and go up to 32. And then you go into, first of all, anybody that tries to get out of that site, make a left turn during peak times, as opposed to going to Estrada, making a right turn and going through the signal, they'll do it once and they won't do it again.
all right. Just want to go back.
So the
to-
shadow parking is
Shadow
giving
parking.
us 5?
About five, shadow parking will give us about 5 spots.
We will
He's gonna
try
work
to
it out.
achieve 5 spots.
Excuse me?
We will try to achieve 5 spots.
Okay, they're going to work on that.
So we still have to give a waiver, right, of what percentage?
Right, but we have to wait till the plan comes back to
Okay.
us.
Okay.
Could be 71.
The timers on the lights, you said the 2 entrances that you want to keep lights on. The back lot,
Wait, saying what you said.
are you going to be putting lights on poles in the back there? How are you going to light the, I don't have the map in front of me right now.
Light poles,
That's okay,
parking lot
Chris,
lights.
That's okay, 'cause I don't know. What's that?
Parking lot lights, light poles.
Are they going to be on timers? Can they be put on timers, like to go off at like midnight, so it doesn't
Yeah, what
impact?
we can do is, if you want to do the one, we have, the ones at the entrances, I would prefer to keep from dawn to dusk.
Right, they have to stay
There's really
there.
no residential
Right.
units adjacent to that. These can go on timers with 1 or 2 with maybe a motion detector, so if somebody parks at 12:30 or 1 o'clock,
Right,
the
it
light
alerts.
will click on. We can
Okay.
do that.
There is that house right across the
Well,
street.
can you clarify that for
The gentleman that talked about
I will,
specific, which ones?
traffic.
we will put that on the lighting plan.
On the lighting plane, it's the back perimeter, Rick,
Yeah.
not Rick, well, Rick also, and Dennis,
Well, if it's on the plan, I don't need it.
I know. Yeah, because I'm asking because of the residents that are down below and.
Yeah, what we'll do is, right, we'll turn those off at 11 o'clock at night, with 1 or 2 of them with a motion detector, so, like I said, for safety purposes, I wouldn't be comfortable just turning them
All right,
off.
so you're going to address that?
Yeah,
and-
not a
okay.
problem,
right.
and not unusual to do that.
And the dumpster, that's the only location we can put it in? That,
Which one don't we like?
the one closest to Estrada, can you do just one dumpster?
It's behind an existing garage. So we kind of took advantage of that existing structure to screen it.
Okay. So it's, all right, so the current garage is there, so, all right. Enclosure-wise, what materials are you gonna use for the enclosure of the dumpster? Dennis, we usually use vinyl or what?
No, we don't use vinyl.
Or do we want to have wood?
One before this.
I don't have the map in front of me, so that's why I'm asking, so.
That's the water. Is it on your plan? This is your plan here. That's the fence. Oops. Detail. It might just be in the
Yeah, whatever the materials are, like I said, I don't have it in front of me, I just want it to be clearly stated in the resolution, Rick, that that has to be maintained and kept clean and maintained. We don't want any four-legged critters
And
around,
the owners have absolutely no problem with
I
it.
know that,
They're
but I just wanna
local
make
people, and
sure-
they'll want to keep it.
because being that it is a residential and it's the hamlet zone and all that with the comprehensive plan, I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that.
So that will be in there. It should also be on note on the plans. And you say you have a detail on the plans already as to the dumpster enclosure? Well, please provide one if there isn't one.
don't see
Our,
it, yeah.
our standard details in masonry, structure,
All right.
bollards.
Just make sure it's on there.
Gate.
Okay. All right, board members, we gave enough information to the applicant to go forward and come back with us
Mm-hmm.
with a modification of sorts? No good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got your,
Are we in a position to authorize your attorney to draft a resolution?
They got an obligation to get this in a certain times.
well, we could always add that on. What, we can't voice a waiver yet because, until we get that shadow parking. But that can always be added into the, Sandy's asking about waiving the parking, because we haven't made that decision yet. But
I
we
mean,
can't.
right now, what has been discussed, I mean, I have like 10 potential conditions, but I think
Yeah.
most of those are going to be resolved on the revised plans, and so they won't need to be conditions. But you certainly need to address the waiver issue, because that does have to be addressed in the resolution. Right now, given the comments, that you would be allowing 9 less parking spaces than what is required, rather than the 14 requested.
Okay.
But if the board thinks differently, then whatever the board wants.
You okay with that?
I'm okay with that, yeah.
Sandy?
I'm okay with it.
Chris?
Yeah, okay.
Rich? Okay. The only thing that I will ask for, deliveries of trucks. We don't know what the potential businesses are going to be, whether they're retail or restaurant. Can we put a restriction on delivery times so as not to disturb the area residents, that no deliveries until 7 AM?
We would be
start?
willing to restrict deliveries and also the refuse pickup, because that's
Okay.
also another
Yeah, 'cause they can be-
noisy activity.
All right. If
Um,
we
so
can come up with a time
Yep.
and put that in a narrative or whatever or put it on the
We'll just put on
plans,
put a map note.
map note.
7 AM is okay? That's,
Most people should be up by 7 because there's kids and school and work. 7 AM is reasonable, I think. I
well,
would
if not, they will be when the garbage truck comes.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say anything later than midnight. Well,
Not, 11 o'clock?
you know, you come up with something, 11 o'clock. All right, board members, we're okay with this? We're good to go on to the next one?
No.
We're closed with the public hearing. Send an email to Maria Rubio in the building department, and she will get it to us. All right? Okay. I'll make a motion to authorize the attorney to prepare a draft resolution so that we have it to review on this application with all the points that we talked about and the points that he has as well. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Maria?
Yes, sir?
I think it's going to be an unwieldy resolution at this point.
I think so,
Because
too.
a lot of these conditions were having things put on the site plan, and if they're put on the site plan, then we don't need all of those conditions. I mean, usually when you have this many requested changes to the site plan itself. You asked for a resubmitted site plan, and then we get the resolution after you've reviewed that, and you add any other conditions you want on it. That's, whatever the board wants, I will do, but that's how we normally do things.
And if I could add to that, I think when I gave my comments before, I said we had written the memo back in, was it April or May? May 22nd. And we had a number of issues in here that we had requested, and they're technical issues, so I didn't go through them with you. But if they could include those on the revised plan, then that'll be something else that we don't need to have as a condition of approval. So I think another iteration of a plan set would be appropriate, and it would make your resolution streamlined.
Okay, I'm going to rescind my motion. One thing I forgot to read, Stu Turner's office, he's told, he sent an email to the consultants and myself. We discussed the landscaping and screening the last time this was on the agenda. We, as agreed, the shared parking matter will be addressed by Mazer. However, from a planning perspective, this is the type of mixed-use development in the Hamlet Center that lends itself to shared and/or banked parking in order to avoid overpaving. Just, I forgot to read that. So by granting this reduction, it falls in with the comprehensive plan that Stu mentioned. All right, gentlemen, we'll
Thank
see
you.
you. Have a good night.
Yep.
I should have read that first off. I forgot all about our notes sitting underneath there. Next item on the agenda is Woodview Heights. Discuss extension request for preliminary subdivision approval. Said property is located on Hill Avenue in Highland Mills and is known on the Village of Woodbury Tax Maps as Section 204, Block 1, Lot 34.2. Jay, just give me a moment.
Good evening.
Let me just get my file folder out. Okay, go for it. I got my notes.
Good evening. Jay Myro, Bluestein, Shapiro, Rich, and Barone for the applicant. The last time we were here, I believe, was in April. We had presented a 13-lot proposal, reducing the number of lots from 15 to 13. The board referred us, your board referred us to the Zoning Board of Appeals for area variances that we needed on 6 lots. We were at the ZBA in May. The public hearing was closed. The board did not decide. We were there a couple weeks ago. The board directed their attorney to draft a resolution to deny the requested variances. I'm expecting that resolution will be voted on and adopted at the July meeting. The last time our preliminary approval was extended was, that'll expire, or has expired. Okay. So I spoke to Mr. Golden. My proposal at this point is we don't have a final determination from the ZBA. I'm not sure when finality of that decision will be. It could be quite a while. Since we're not going to be ever seeking final approval on the preliminarily approved plat, we're prepared at this point to have the board let the preliminary approval lapse. We will acknowledge that, leave the application open until we get finality on the ZBA decision, and whatever the result of that is, we'll be back with our revised plan at that time.
Okay.
That way, I'm sorry, that way you don't have to have me coming back here every 6 months
Okay.
for an extension.
All right, fine. I just want to note for the record that we did receive a letter from residents at Hill Avenue. Karen Alera Selick, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, just for the record that we received that. With that being said, board members, we're going to agree to what Mr. Myro has requested from us?
Yes.
Sandy? Chris? Yes. Rich?
Yes.
All right, so we'll
Great.
see you in the future.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night. Thank you. I should have put them on first.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. next application is Aon, and then after this one, John, then you can go home also, all right? Applicant's here for Aon Hotel.
Madam Chair, I recuse myself from this application.
Yes, ma'am. Hello. Go ahead.
Good evening, George Lithgow, Jacobowitz and Gobitz, and Jason Pitangaro for Aon.
Okay,
Basically, we are here to see if the board will entertain having its attorney draft a resolution for conditional approval. We've been through the consultant notes, we've been through the similar applications that have received conditional approval, and we believe that we are at the point where we could at least contemplate.
is the microphone on?
It-
Just, thank you. You don't have to start over again, but go ahead.
Okay. I believe we're at the point where we could contemplate a draft resolution that tells us that we have complied with conditions, or what conditions we need to comply with in order to get the plan signed, to have building permits and COs. The model for what I have been looking or contemplating is Cabela's approval resolution that was done in, I believe, 2015 or 16. It has a number of conditions that are very comparable to what I believe would be appropriate for the Aon proposal. So we've asked you and your consultants to identify any open issues, to give us whatever comments or concerns that still need to be addressed. Looking at the record and looking at the site plan as it exists, I believe we're largely at a state of closure as far as complying with the conditions and standards that are in your code. I know that we had a public hearing, two sessions of a public hearing in February and March of 2016. There were issues that were raised. We responded to all of those issues. And at that point, we had one final meeting with the board, and then we went to seek a variance from Local Law 2 and Local Law 3 of 2016. That variance is no longer required. However, I know that you do have a moratorium in place on hotel applications, which prevents you from taking action to approve a hotel, although you may continue your review. So basically, it is a relatively short moratorium. At the public hearing, I believe the village board expressed its optimism that it would be able to resolve issues and concerns that require a moratorium within the 6-month period. We're already 1 month into that 6-month time, so we're hopeful that we can get a resolution which sets forth conditions, and at such time as you're free to take action, that you'll be able to act upon that resolution.
Thank you. Jason, you going to add anything to it?
Not at this time.
Okay. Dennis, I'm looking at your June 12th agenda summary and carryovers. You have a number of items there. Would you like to, are
Sure.
these items that can be put into a resolution, or they need to be
We had made a
completed before?
recommendation in a number of memoranda that we forwarded to you and we gave to the applicant. The last was back in May, early May. And we identified in there issues that we thought could be conditions of approval. And that was in a number of memoranda. The last one was May 10th, 2018. But we noted in there, and we believe still, that there are some of items where they may require additional submissions and actions by the board in consideration. And we gave you a number of these on here. There's guidance on repairs to Estrada Road, because there were certain things in the pedestrian study that the board would have to opine on as to whether you think is appropriate, and then you'd have to get some input from the highway superintendent. ESO access, we had asked for something on there. That's something pictorial that we want to look at, and we think you should look at. It's not just us. Water supply for fire protection, we had some comments on that. that we were given at an ESO meeting by the building inspector and the fire marshal, or actually the fire department at the time. The drainage plan, it hasn't been amended, it's only modestly changed in terms of the plan. They have opined that it really doesn't require any revision. I'd like to see that a little bit more and see something technical on them. There may not be much on that. The ARB approval, you had a public hearing. There were a number of questions by the board, but I don't know that the board ever came to a conclusion and resolution of what you wanted on that and whether you wanted any changes. On landscaping, I just deferred to Stu's office. I have not opined on that. There's a landlocked parcel here, which originally they indicated they were going to do by a reverse subdivision. At the last meeting, I think Mr. Lithgow pointed out that they would like to do it by an agreement. I think he called it a declaration of lot agreement. I'm not familiar with that, and I think you'd probably want to hear from Rick as to whether that's appropriate and whether you need to see anything on that. And traffic, Mazer was authorized at that time, at your last meeting, to combine the reviews, just like they did on the previous one, the Central Valley Properties, also to combine Central Valley Properties' impact on any traffic on Estrada Road with this one similarly and see whether there was any modification. If anything, if John needs to see anything on that or you need to see anything on that, that's the only other item. Those are the items I thought that the board would probably have some input. All the other conditions that we had in our resolution or our recommendations were those that were typical that you would have in a resolution that Rick would prepare for your review.
Thank you. Rick?
George, did you get this?
George? Oh. No, you finish? I wasn't trying to cut you off, and I wasn't trying to sound like a parent.
No offense taken.
George, I'm still confused as to why you are asking for potentially this lot agreement versus a normal merger that you would do on the plans. So if you could please explain the purpose of why you want one over the other.
The definition of. In your code, it provides for lots or a lot or lots to be the subject of a site plan approval. We simply would like to keep this as simple and straightforward as possible. Record a covenant which will require that both of these lots will remain in the same ownership and be used for the same use during the period of time that this property is used for the hotel.
Do you have the copy of the plan as to two lots we're talking about? Excuse me, I just want to take a look at the plan to
problem.
see the two lots that we're talking about so I can
Yep.
picture this better. Yeah. Where is this now? It would be a landlocked, if you kept it the way it is, it'd be landlocked piece back here, right? No, I understand that, but normally the board tries to clean up things. All right, what's being discussed is there are presently two lots involved, one of which is landlocked against the large parcel and up against the New York State Thruway. Typically, what this board does in situations like that is require the applicant to merge those lots so as to, for planning purposes, to keep landlocked parcels from continuing in existence, and then ultimately possibly being requested to have some improvement on them because they're a separate lot. So I would suggest to the board that they require, similarly as they have done in other applications, to require the applicant to merge those lots, and you'll approve the one site plan with those two lots merged on them.
Thank you.
I don't think that poses any very difficult burden on your part.
Requires the preparation of a plan, it requires a public hearing, it requires additional time and expense for an applicant.
No, we're not talking about an additional public hearing. We're talking about what this board normally does, George, which is to request that the applicant simply, as part of its site plan, to erase the lot line in there and have a site plan of one lot that will now be designated. There may be some requirement for a filing with the county, but there'd be no additional steps before this planning board.
Okay, it is a requirement of your code that there be a public hearing unless it's waived.
Well,
The board is willing to waive the public hearing, I'm sure.
the board has effectively waived the public hearing when we're talking about circumstances similar to this. So I would recommend to the board that they waive the public hearing similarly with respect to this application.
We're willing to consider it.
Well, consider a way.
Okay.
I am suggesting to the board that you request that the lots be merged and that any potential requirement for a public hearing on this be waived, as you have done in the past.
All right, I'm going to make a motion that that the planning board requires that these two lots be merged and that we waive the public hearing at this time on this merger.
I second it.
Any discussion amongst the board members? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just clarify one point. That
Go
would be a
ahead.
condition of approval, that we actually implement the merger.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick. In respect to putting that on the plan, these other items on the plan, the drainage plan, we have not, are we going to see a revision to the site plan with the drainage plan? So you have to, you're going to be amending the plan, right?
We don't feel that there's going to be any amendment to the plan. I think back in 2017, we requested further review of it. At that time, it was determined that there was only reduction in impervious areas, which would result in reduction in potential runoff. So we don't expect that there's any change that is going to occur to that plan. We could also go through the other items that were listed as technical concerns that the board would have to weigh in on. We were not in receipt of the memo, but we can go through them item by item if the board would like.
Well, I'm addressing the drainage plan right now. If our consultant is saying that the drainage plan needs to be amended, and you're saying you don't want to do it.
I'm not saying that I don't want to do it. I'm saying that it's not required by the regulations that pertain to the drainage plan.
But if our consultant is requesting it to be done, or added to it, or revised, and we
Maria,
can-
well, let me explain the
Thank you.
comments that we had, all the comments, and I don't think it's for the board right now, quite frankly. The applicant has requested of the board and its consultants that we identify any items that we thought should be discussed, should be submitted, that the board would require, that could not be added as a resolution condition. That was their request a number of times. That was the intent of this memo. Typically, we send out our memos to the applicants prior to the meeting. I don't know if that happened, quite frankly, because usually we write a specific memo for each application. In this case, you only asked us to upgrade it or to provide something, so we did it on a carryover memo.
Right.
This would have had to been sent to each of the applicants. I'm not sure if that was done. So I'll have to check that, but in any event, we will give a copy of this to the applicant. Nothing could have happened before this meeting anyway, because you wouldn't accept anything at the meeting, and this was written in response to their listing on the agenda.
But you did receive the memo from May 10th. You do have that memo, don't you?
Yes.
Okay.
We did, I
All right.
got it from the website. I did not receive it
All
from
right.
the
I
consultant.
apologize for that. I will make sure going forward that our building department secretary gets you the memos.
Can I just speak to the SWIP one more time?
Go ahead.
Because I have discussed it with Jason, I've looked at Dennis's comment in the May 10th memorandum, and I did ask Jason what the situation was with regard to the SWIP. When the SWIP was, there is a SWIP, it was done when the hotel was a larger size with more impervious surface. It has not been changed since that time. And Jason and I have discussed it, and Jason doesn't believe it's necessary or appropriate to reduce the size of the detention basin. So essentially, it does do what it's supposed to do. It contains the amount of water that's necessary to contain, provides water quality treatment. It has been, I believe, preliminarily reviewed by your consultant. And I would like to point out that in order for the SWIP to be filed, since you are an MS4, your MS4 entity or the MS4 officer is going to have to review the SWIP and determine it does comply with the requirements of the state and the village code. I think in the circumstances you have now, it would be appropriate to make that a condition of your approval, and I think that's all that's really required.
Maria, if that was the only item, we might be able to handle it that way. I put it in here, if you will, because there were a number of items I thought that were coming back to the board. I
All
would
right.
prefer to have it addressed at this time. The guidance on the repairs to Estrada Road, that's a report you have. I think that they need some guidance. You need to make some determinations that should be
Right.
considered by the board, and I think
right.
some of the others, too.
All right. From your May 10th memo, Chris, I don't think you have that memo. You might not have it yet. You have, you pull it up, okay. Dennis, let's just start with, let's take your memo. Let's go page by page. Page 2, letter B, review of submitted materials, the technical. Letter A, technical, letter A, the sewage pump station design. The last sentence, from our discussions with the sewer department, we recommend the pump station remain private and operated by the hotel. Do we need Rick, do we need a special agreement for that? Does something have to be worked out between the village trustees and, I'm gonna go pay
I need Dennis's
memo? Okay.
We did not identify that as one of the items that we thought was necessary for this. We thought that could be handled by a resolution.
Okay, it's resolution,
It-
okay.
If it's private, I don't even think, I don't know if the trustees would get involved, it's just simply private.
So that's gonna be a resolution?
That would be a resolution
Okay.
condition.
All right, so B, force main size. Resolution. Applicant's plan shows a 4-inch force main which would be acceptable subject to pump selection and station design conforming a solids carrying velocities and appropriate cycle times to avoid odors. The design of the force main shall be subject to the approval of the sewer superintendent. Resolution?
Yes.
Thank you. Force main route. We have reviewed the force main design with the sewer administrator and is essentially satisfactory. However, the final design route needs to be confirmed. Acceptance of this line for public ownership and maintenance will be under the jurisdiction of the Board of Trustees. There may be some public benefit in the ownership of the line, and which we will review with the sewer department and Board of Trustees. Question to you, has the Board of Trustees reviewed this? Have they made a decision?
No,
I'm
I
being
don't
a
think
wise
this has
guy
been
now.
presented to the Board of Trustees yet.
Okay.
I'm just advising you that if it was going to be accepted for municipal ownership, that you could make a recommendation, but that would fall with the Board of Trustees if they wanted to
Okay.
accept it.
Is that a resolution issue?
Let's just wait.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's after 9, I'm sorry, I get testy after 9 o'clock.
So are you suggesting
Sorry.
that they need to be offering that force main to the village?
What I'm suggesting is there may be a public benefit to the acceptance of that main. Typically, if they don't have to maintain it, they wouldn't mind offering it for dedication. It's going to go along the public right-of-way. A portion will be in the public right-of-way at the end. So that's something I thought that I should review with the sewer superintendent to see if they want to own that, and if the recommendation of the sewer superintendent was yes, then we would make a presentation, or we would ask them to present it to the Board of Trustees for their consideration.
We can do that between now and the next meeting. Talk with, not the trustees, just talk with
I don't know if it has to be completed. I mean, we could just have it as a condition, and then if the trustees don't want to do it,
that they need to offer it. That's what I'm trying to.
yes, the condition would be they offer it. But we didn't have that one down also as a requirement for further discussion by the board. I think
Right.
we can handle
I'm
that as
just
a
going through your
condition.
memo,
Yep.
Dennis, I'm sorry. And then I'll go to the next thing. So do you think that could be handled through a resolution?
Yes.
Okay. Pending the Board of Trustees agreement, okay. Guidance on repairs to Estrada Road. Any repairs and improvements to Estrada Road from the board's review and consideration of pedestrian safety plan suggests speed monitoring devices, crosswalk signage, and sidewalks other, excuse me, would be subject to the review of the highway superintendent. If there are facilities to be offered for dedication, this would require approval of the Board of Trustees. The applicant has offered to provide these mitigations for the safety concerns noted in the pedestrian traffic study. And you do have that? No, you don't.
And that is one, yes, that I have
Yes.
listed, only
Yep.
because there were certain things that were offered. I don't know what the board wants in there. I don't know what you're going to ask them to do. I don't know that they know the general parameters, but I think you probably should have some kind of a recommendation from John. And this was also the subject of a separate memorandum that we wrote. I don't recall of any conclusions by the board.
Okay.
Now, if there were any conclusions of the board, then that could suffice, but I don't recall that.
Okay. Go ahead, George.
Bit more specifically, if you look at the pedestrians.
Can you turn it on, George?
To address that point a little bit more specifically, if you look at the pedestrian safety study, which was submitted to the board and reviewed and approved in December of 2016, the last page, paragraph 8, contains the recommended improvements that the study determined are necessary to rectify existing conditions on Estrada. The applicant at that time offered to provide those specific things. They include signage for school bus stops. They include repair of one or two lights that were not functioning or functioning in a defective manner. They included striping across Estrada to provide conduits for people across. All of those things are necessary, period, in the opinion of the consultants who prepared and reviewed the traffic study. So we are willing to do those things. That is what was deemed to be necessary and appropriate. It is not a function of the project itself. It's a function of existing conditions on the roadway. We recognize and agree that we would need to have the approval and agreement of the Board of Trustees to do so. We are willing to enter into a developer's agreement, which would include that, as well as a more standard performance agreement for things that are required as a condition of our approval to assure those things get done. We
My
have
question
a
to-
very specific set of things. We're willing to do it, and we're willing to get a developer's agreement with the Board of Trustees.
Thank you for that. But now, do we have that on a plan so that it's in pictorial, as Dennis said, that we have it, the village trustees have it, the building inspector has it, highway superintendent has it? We haven't seen those on a plan yet. Do we have something, Jason? Was something drafted so that we can see that on a plan?
Those are off-site improvements that are being voluntarily made by a developer. We're willing to prepare a plan if it's required by the Board of Trustees.
All right, so then you're going to go to the Board of Trustees with a plan then, so they know what
Right.
you're
What-
talking about pictorially?
What would be required, and this happens on certain applications, is that this board does not have the ability, as it knows, or power to require off-site improvements of this type. That aren't specifically related to some sort of seeker mitigation, for instance. So what would be in the resolution would be a condition that they offer these off-site improvements to the Board of Trustees, and that it would be up to the Board of Trustees to approve which and to what extent that they want such things to be at the cost of the applicant, which will be included in a developer's agreement directly between the applicant and the Board of Trustees, the village, not overseen by this board. And that it will have provisions in there with respect to that they are absorbing the cost, what happens if they started and they don't finish. All those types of provisions would be included in a developer's agreement. So the condition here would simply be that they would offer these to the Board of Trustees for the Board of Trustees' consideration.
Okay.
Maria, whether you get a plan or not, I don't think is critical, but I think that the critical thing is that you know and understand, and the applicant understands exactly the scope of the improvements. Now, are you referring to the VHB memo of December 2016? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. And see, the sidewalks, it says, due to the low pedestrian, this is a conclusion or summary, due to the low pedestrian volumes, additional sidewalks in the area to the east of Nazaro Court, although desirable and beneficial, may not be justified based on the low pedestrian volumes and the associated cost of construction and maintenance. I don't know if that, I guess they're saying no sidewalks, but they say that they're desirable and beneficial. So I want the board to understand, the applicant to understand exactly what is going to be provided.
All right, I'm going
In
to take a
another-
step, I'm going to take a step back.
Yep.
VHB is no longer our traffic consultants. I'm not sure if this report was given to Mazer, and I believe they were given this report to review. I can't find the report that you mentioned this. If you give me a date, I'll probably find it in this paperwork.
There is a memo from me on the June 13th.
Okay, that memo, got it.
Basically, it just goes a summary of all the VHBs, all the applicant reports,
Okay,
VHB memorandums, et cetera. We concur with the, for example, the installing a radar speed detector, pedestrian sidewalks,
Okay.
crosswalks, et cetera. Those are listed of what we agreed, concur with the VHB. So we didn't recreate the wheel. We went
Right.
through the report, the recommendations,
here.
et cetera. What we did say is the fact is that we looked at the intersection of 32 and Estrada, and while the previous applicant had done the study, it's basically included the traffic from the hotel. There's still the issue of the potential upgrading of the two signals, et cetera. But one question we had when we were looking at the review is, this hotel is not on a state highway, it's on a thruway, basically. And I don't know how people are gonna find it. So I have asked is, have you come up with some kind of a directional signage to people from the highway can get through the site? I wanna know whether or not you've done something like that. And the reason is it affects the distribution of the traffic.
Right. We have the hotel's going to be operated by a group called Prestige Hospitality. Prestige operates and owns several hotels, and they were at the public hearing. They testified that they have considered the location, that given the nature of the hotel and the way that people come to hotels these days, they are quite confident that the use of mapping services, Waze, those different kind of devices. It's more common for people to find a hotel with this than it is with a map or any other directional signage.
George, I agree with you, and that's how I find hotels. Sometimes it's right, and that's how trucks find the bridge on the Hutchinson River Parkway about once every 2 weeks. What I'm concerned about is the fact that I don't want proliferation of signage along 32 within the village. I don't want the sign that says hotel to the right, make next right, et cetera. And if you're willing to indicate there's no additional off-site signs required, then I'm satisfied with it.
We were willing to do that.
Well, I think the codes, you can't have off-site signage anyplace unless you have it on your property.
Right, but they sneak into the signage indirectly.
Where the exit from the
Yeah,
main highway
all
would
of
be,
a
but
sudden you
other.
see a
with-
sign, et cetera, right.
Right,
So
'cause
if
we
there's
don't-
no request to put additional signage, that's fine.
Okay, gotcha.
Maria, on
Yes,
this, obviously then, when John read this and interpreted that first one about sidewalks, you went with the, although it's not desirable and beneficial, you went with the, it's not required, and so the sidewalks weren't in here. And that's basically what I wanted the board to do with the applicant, is to make sure that we have a full understanding of this, because John concurs with all these items, but some of them say like pedestrian crosswalk in the area of Valley Avenue and Bloodgood Court. Well, you may have something in your mind, and they may have something in their mind when we say in the area of, and I guess it's probably reasonable, people could decide, but it would be better if we had concretely what was going to be done. Same with the radar speed feedback signs. They talk about that, but in the report, it talks about either temporary, let me see on that one.
Now, I can understand the pedestrian crosswalk in in the area of Valley
Temporary
Avenue and
trailers.
Bloodgood, because it is a
Okay.
condo development, and there are children who walk to school. And I can understand the safety of having a pedestrian crosswalk. I know we can't authorize it, but we can suggest that you go to the Village of Board of Trustees, and that can be part of your developer's agreement to make sure that that crosswalk is there for the safety of the children. I would concur with that, but that would have to be, it's an off-site.
All right, it's an
Work.
off-site improvement.
Yep.
The basic parameters are set in here, and I guess that it would go as a condition for the Board of Trustees to review it.
Right. And what would a light assembly to existing utility poles located on the southwest corner of
It's
Nazaro?
it's the
Street
street
lighting.
lights.
The
There's
street
a number of
lights?
street lights that weren't functioning
Okay.
or not functioning properly.
Or you may need a new one.
Okay, all right, that's something, that's off-site improvement. The installing of radar speed feedback signs, are those the signs when you're going down the road, you're supposed to be doing 25, it says you're doing 50?
Right, some say thank you, and some say watch out.
Okay, because recently our town police department has purchased one or two of those items, and they've been rotating them around.
Right.
I don't know if we want to make a permanent one, but that's between the
I would,
village.
right, I mean, that's whether they want to go, that's the temporary one where you can move them from
Move it
location to
around,
go.
but you're saying a permanent.
This could be permanent.
Gotcha. And I guess with the safety of the school children and because of the bridge, the height and everything.
And
I
the
can-
site restrictions, et cetera, so.
All right, and that's something that you have to go to the Village Board of Trustees. Okay, so those 3 items, and then a plan showing directional signage. All right, so we're good on that part.
I just want the applicant to be aware that those 3 items are not necessarily inexpensive, especially when it comes to pedestrian crossings.
Thank you. All right. What did I leave off? Village administrative items, this is for village. Water
Yes.
main installation and dedication, that's you have to go to the Board of Trustees for that. If a line is installed properly along Estrada Road as proposed, we would recommend acceptance for public ownership and maintenance. Force main installation and dedication,
That's a new one. She
that's
said.
the Board of Trustees, to be reviewed by them and the sewer administrator. Signage,
These are resolution conditions, yeah.
village administrative item, signage, the details on any proposed safety signage would need to be reviewed with the highway department, which is under the village.
These could all be handled as resolution conditions.
Okay, resolution, those 3 items, thank you. The other, which is number 3, letter A, developers agreement. The village clerk asked for a draft agreement, I'm not sure if it was done, that's not my purview. Someone can follow up on that to see if the village clerk has had it and submitted it to the Board of Trustees. Boundary line change, we talked about that already. Site plan. Dennis, stop me resolution, fire department to review turning radiuses in parking lot?
That's something that I thought it might affect the layout, so I think that's something that should come before the board.
Okay. Resolution or on a plan? 'Cause
That's why it was in the other memo, ESO
Yeah.
access, a plan showing the turning radii for emergency service vehicles in the parking lot should be provided and reviewed.
Because I know we've been through a number of ESO meetings in the last 6 weeks or so.
That's standard
and we've-
practice of
It's
the
standard
board.
practice, it's not being,
A fire
and
marshal.
Chris, I know you're firematic background, so you kind of agree with that, huh? Okay. ARB, any open items regard to ARB submissions? What do we have here? Public hearings held. We recommend to provide the most current ARB material submissions and application for the board's final determination of the same. Has anything changed since 2 years? All right, we have a final,
Yeah,
I guess we can get a
I
final.
can.
Let me finish, please.
Sure.
If you can, if we can have a revised one, you can just stamp it, just so that we can have it for the resolution, so it's everything is proper. That's all I'm asking for.
I have them with me tonight. Were submitted previously, so it's not new or additional
Right.
material.
But I'm just saying, just make sure our attorney gets it so we can have it properly recorded in the resolution. Water supply for fire protection, that's on your note here? No, it's not. Is it the riser room, Dennis?
That's
Where is it?
one of the things that I noted, if it was
there
going
it
to
is.
change anything.
The riser room details are subject to review by the building inspector and fire department to the extent this may impact a site plan. So we need to resolve that. Do you have anything to resolve that with, Jason? Or are you gonna working on that?
I don't think there's any issue there. The water line enters the building, it travels under a portion of the building, and then enters the riser room.
The only issue there, and I want to make sure the applicant's aware of it, is that they require shut-off valves on the exterior located immediately adjacent to the riser room. This just comes up on every ESO meeting we have. It frequently requires that they revise their parking. I don't know if they've accounted for it. They may have, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So that could be on the plan? That should be on the plan for the building inspector, and that should be reviewed by the fire department, correct? For fire safety issues, for to
Primarily,
protect
it
people?
could be reviewed by the fire department. That's probably wise, but the building inspector is quite aware of what's
All right.
required under.
So that should be shown on the plan? Yes?
Yes,
Thank you.
this is the water supply for fire protection.
The
Yes.
drainage plan was not amended for the latest revive. We talked about that already, the drainage plan. We can agree to disagree on that. Landscaping. Stu sent to me, we have not submitted any further review. Our comments on landscaping, screening, and wetland vegetation were submitted in an earlier memo, and according to the applicant, nothing further has been submitted. See H2M summary status memo. That's from Stu. I'll leave that alone for now. Finally, in our memo of March 31st, 2016, we included 12 recommended conditions for action. We believe these can be resolution conditions, but if the board believes any further plan modifications are needed to address these, this should be resolved to prior action. Any of those 12 items on this list, Dennis, from June 12th?
No, if we said they were resolution conditions, we
Okay.
didn't try to identify them.
Landlocked parcel,
generally just
traffic,
puts them-
all right.
Should we go through those?
I know Rick, you got all that?
Should we go through those 12? Because I think the memo,
We've recommended they be resolution conditions. I don't think you need to go through them. I think that was your point, is to try. What's that? You wanted,
resolution conditions.
You want me to pull my memo from 2016?
Maria, we're good with Dennis's recommendation, they be added as a condition.
Do you want me to go through that memo? I will. Or you're going to review it?
I've been through it.
All right,
Applicant now agrees.
perfect,
Applicant agreed in March of 2016.
Applicant still agrees.
perfect. All right. So now where does that leave us, Rick? Where are we at this point? We have a moratorium that's 1 month in. We cannot approve anything according to the law, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
But you are allowed to go ahead and conduct the meeting as you have tonight. You can authorize me to draft a resolution. I have been instructed to come up with a number of conditions to that resolution this evening. And we can go ahead and put together a resolution and submit it to the board for its consideration and not for approval.
okay. With that being said, is the applicant going to go to the Village Board of Trustees within the next 5 months to work this out between them? Or you're not going to do anything with the Village Board of Trustees?
We would like to do that and to address the issues and concerns that have been identified.
Okay. So that would be up to you to move forward with that on your,
Yes, but what we would like is to have the resolution state what we have to do,
Resolution we were reading from Dennis.
so that both.
George, you got to use the microphone, I'm sorry.
What we would request is that the resolution state what the developers agreement would have to do. I think it's basically to establish any performance security and to provide for the specific things that are recommended by the pedestrian safety study, as we discussed tonight.
Yeah, I have that.
You want us to put that into the resolution, but you have to come to us with the developers agreement. So we don't have any
No,
input. We
no.
don't have any input into the
No,
developers
you
agreement.
have nothing to do with the developers agreement.
Chris, if you want
That
to
is
do it.
something that when there are off-site improvements that are not required by this board, but are being offered by an applicant, and that happens from time to time. And your condition simply somehow references that these items will be brought before the Board of Trustees in this instance, and whatever is agreed upon to be included in the developer's agreement between the applicant and the Village Board of Trustees. And you have no further oversight of that.
Okay. All right. Board members, with everything that we've heard in the last time frame here, do we have a motion to authorize the attorney to draft a draft resolution of approval?
Does Rick feel we're ready for that? Did you said we could?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you've noted a lot of conditions, but there are some projects that you have that have a lot of conditions. So we'll go ahead and prepare that. You will look at it, you'll consider it, you'll decide whether or not you want to add, change, or otherwise modify the resolution of approval after you get the draft for your consideration.
Okay. Yes,
All right. Actually, hold that thought with that motion.
all right.
One item, point of, firematically, Dennis, can you look into this? This hotel was based on the Central Valley Fire Company responding from that building. As of right now, all trucks are responding from the Highland Mills building, which is a mile and a half away from the Central Valley Firehouse. I'm just putting it out there. Do we have to adjust anything for fire? For fire time? Because I know we reviewed that about fire truck response times, because there's certain bridges they can't go under.
That is a development that's changed, but I think they may have looked at it from both houses. I'm not sure at the time. We can talk to the fire department, but I mean, they're responding to, if that change is taking place, they're going to respond to everything from that.
Right, they are. But I just want to could you follow up with them and just send them an email and just check with them on that? That was something I forgot to ask. All right, what was your motion?
I propose that
A draft
a
resolution?
draft resolution, yes.
All right, do we have a second? Any discussion, gentlemen, that you want added into this resolution? We'll just look at the draft when it's done by Rick. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Gentlemen? Okay, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Good night, thank you.
Yep. Welcome back, Sandy.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is IBEW, review proposed amended site plan for the addition of a prefab steel accessory building,
I would give you this one.
4,600 square feet. We're going to have to adjust that for classroom use and parking lot expansion. Said property is located at 67 Commerce Drive South in Harriman and is known on the Village of Woodbury Tax Census Section 225, Block 2, Lot 15.2. Thank you, John. Have a good night. I'll talk to you. John, if you do send any reports out, you have their, if you send anything up, thank you very much. Have a good night. Yeah, he can have that. You have it? All right, I'll take that back. Okay. Oops, you don't need that? Okay. Oh, I thought maybe I got rid of it. All right. I wouldn't want you to miss out on any reading materials.
Good
Huh?
evening, everyone.
Just give me 1 second, Dominic. How are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you. It's
Let me
nice
just
to...
get my notes together here. Central Valley Properties, that goes to this one. All right. This is IBEW, right? Yeah. Here we go. Okay, go ahead. I got the file.
Oh, thank you very much. Dominic Cordisco from the law firm of Drake Loeb, here on behalf of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I'm here with Eric Bowe, who is the design professional with Lan Associates. They've provided assistance in taking over the plan and have been the drafters of the plan that is before you now. The last time we were here was in April, basically 2 months ago, almost to the day, and we received comments at that time. And since that time, we've been working on the plans and have presented revised plans for you and your consultant's consideration. The overall nature of the application has not changed. This is an additional structure to be used for practical purposes as part of the training facility for the students that are coming there. One point of clarification is that it is a 60 by 100 foot building, so a total of 6,000 square feet. And at this point, if the board would like, I would turn it over to Eric, who could walk you through it to refamiliarize yourselves with it if you would like, and also we can address any questions or attempt to address any questions you may have.
Perfect. Just one quick question. It's Eric, right?
Yes,
The gentleman that we met with yesterday at the ESO meeting, did he tell you all the different nuances that we talked about?
he did. That
And
was
you're gonna-
Young Woo, and we went over it today.
Okay, and that's what you're going to tell the board? So I don't have to tell them. Beautiful. Thank you.
Good evening, Eric Bowe with Land Associates. The plan is fairly simple, a 6,000 square foot building here to the northwest of the existing building, and a parking expansion to the northeast of the existing building. The property itself is 19.1 acres, partially in Woodbury and partially in Harriman. The vast majority of the improvements are in Woodbury. The changes that were made since yesterday was the meeting with the first responders and whatnot. What they requested is something that we drafted up just today. Instead of what used to show as a loop going between the two buildings, what they requested instead was a dead end on this end and a dead end on this end. This roadway coming off the existing parking area here would be a dead end that widens into this area, and that would be used mainly for ambulance access, with perhaps access control to prevent ordinary vehicles from getting into that area. Same with the emergency access in the rear.
No, we don't have that. It was just less than 24 hours ago that we.
Right, can we get the small one?
We could, actually, when you prepare these
When
revised
we
ones,
come back for public hearing, yes. Would you prefer small to large?
we prefer the smaller
I
sizes.
love small. Small's
but
great.
the consultants.
Right, would
like
get
the-
full size.
They need to see it a little.
That's a great idea.
Perfect, thank you.
You got it.
Yeah, that's why I'm having them talk about it, so that's why we don't have it in front of us yet.
No, I know, I didn't know if there was something
Yeah.
that came in today.
No. Go ahead.
The parking in the rear, we're proposing as partially porous pavement that would basically handle the stormwater increases that we're proposing for the new impervious areas. The rear parking lot would be lit with new LED light fixtures, downlight, back shielded, everything in accordance with your code. And the parking that's proposed would result in parking that exceeds what your code requires, however, what the IBEW has specifically requested for their students. Does anybody have any questions?
Did you ever figure out, is it going to be a pitched roof or a flat roof? Because I know that was one of the questions from yesterday.
It is, I have a picture of it, I can flip to that.
Yeah. Because I know that was one of Dennis's questions. So it's a flat roof.
Well, it's a metal building with
Okay, I
a
see-
very
I see
low
the- I didn't see
pitched,
the bottom, okay.
right,
Gotcha.
very low pitched roof.
Okay. Dennis, do you see that? They have a little picture there.
Okay, that's pretty much what we heard, yes.
Okay. So it's a one-story pitched roof prefab steel building, correct?
Correct.
All right, and we didn't,
And while I've got it shown, here's the floor plan, happens to be here. It's student areas and restrooms with a small office. It's basically to expand upon what they already do in their facility.
okay. Now those, 1, 2, 3, 4, those 6 areas, those are enclosed 6 rooms?
Yes.
Okay. All right, not a problem, because I think when we spoke about that yesterday with the ambulance, you're clearly going to mark like
That's what was
1, 2,
requested.
3, 4?
Certainly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's ADA access from the current building to the new building? We talked
Correct.
about
It's
that yesterday.
anticipated that most of the student traffic would come through, so
Right.
this is basically flat right across.
Okay. Yeah, we did ask that,
It needs to be.
from where the entrance of the building is, that curved area be paved for the ambulance, and if the fire truck needed to get in there to get from the from the side there, so that was.
Yes, we can accommodate that request.
Okay. And,
It's shown as porous pavers.
Yep. And what else did we talk about yesterday? It's 6,000 square foot, not 6,500?
6,000.
Okay, change that number. And between the two buildings, there's a 25 feet between the two buildings.
That's correct.
So, the fire department said that they had no problem from the corner of the building from the back corner building to the front corner building of the new structure. They said they were okay without having a gravel road up in there. And you're gonna submit the concept plan with the layout in a smaller version for us, larger for the consultants. Beautiful.
Correct.
Fire lane, mountable curves, parking in front. Okay, I'm just going over my notes. Just to report back to the board, on 4/19, we sent to the Orange County Department of Planning and the Orange County DPW. We have a Part 2 that was prepared on May 2nd. Lead agency statuses were returned back to us from the Woodbury Police Department, Village of Harriman Board of Trustees, Orange County Department of Planning, and New York State DOT. They all said that we could be lead agency. On May 16th, the Orange County Department of Planning, they gave us a response. I gave a copy yesterday to the applicant, which I'm sure he gave it to you as well. We have a memo from H2M on June 12th. And yesterday, we had the ESO meeting, which we don't have the minutes yet, but I'm sure we'll get them. Other than that, anyone have questions for Eric before I go to the consultants?
Eric, does any of the classrooms have dividable walls that open up to expand the classroom space, or they're solid walls?
As far as I'm concerned, the architects tell me they're solid. If there's anybody here from IBDW that would like to comment?
Solid?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
didn't think about that yesterday.
Those are testing booths. Those are actually hands-on testing booths.
Just use the microphone, I'm sorry. Whoops. Testing booths. I guess they go in,
I'm Craig Jacobs.
Oh, I
I'm
see.
training director. I'm the one that runs that facility. Those dividers that you see there are actually not even going to be closed off. The front walls are just merely stud walls. It's so that the instructors could actually see in and see what the students are doing as they do testing.
okay.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
No? No.
Sandy? Chris? Rich? Okay. Dennis, I'm going to jump to you. Any follow-up?
Bear with me, I'm reading my memo on a phone here, because I forgot to bring this file.
No problem.
As far, oh, thank you. Solved the problem.
Do you want the June 12th
Well, this is an
memo?
applicant that we did get the memo to.
You want I have the June 12th memo here
so-
for you.
As far as the use is concerned, we did talk to Gary about this, and it falls under your code, under specialized education and training is permitted in the zone. We had a few comments on bulk and area regulations, which I'm sure the applicant will take a look at and correct on the plan. As far as the primary issue was the ESO meeting, we did have a meeting with the ESOs. They were very accommodating because that road that runs around was a requirement of theirs in previous reviews. But they thought that they could still adequately fight a fire and they could provide emergency response if that road was taken away. Quite frankly, the portion of the gravel roadway between the two buildings that they were proposing to maintain, they thought they would never stage an equipment that close to the building that was in jeopardy, okay? It's too close for their equipment to be, puts their equipment in jeopardy. They have adequate places in other areas to fight the fire or address an emergency. And they also thought that it would probably be an area where things might be stored temporarily and it might be blocked, and they don't need it. So they made an accommodation there, but they asked for a number of other things, which I think Maria's talked about a little bit. ADA access in the back, paved area. We talked about offsetting some of the paved areas with the pervious pavers that they're speaking about. And so I think we had a successful ESO meeting, which I dictated the minutes of, but they haven't yet been distributed, and when, probably tomorrow, we'll distribute those minutes of the meeting.
Okay.
As far as we made some comments on the driveway and the parking. I think those are technical details that they can modify, and if they have any questions on it, they can, they can address them with us, but I think it's fine. The existing structure plus the new structure has a requirement for parking of 166 spaces. In this case, the plan shows 178 spaces, and they're providing additional parking towards the north on the property. And I'll jump down to that additional parking that they have proposed, and they've showed some pervious pavement, not pavement, but pervious areas where they're going to park the cars. The driveways, they have kept as a macadam surface because of the loadings and because of the frequent traffic, but the areas they're parking, they're proposing some pervious paver stones and gravel. We had a little discussion about that after the ESO meeting. I would like them to consider additional types of pervious stones. I'll take a look at whatever they're proposing in terms of the specifications, but I've used, those are full blocks with only narrow strips in between for stone. The blocks, they tell me, are pervious. I'd like to see that. The ones that I've used in the past have about 50% open area and stone, so that we can pretty much be assured that the stormwater has an opportunity to run through. But we'll review those details with them, but that needs to be resolved. We need a stormwater management plan submitted. They've said they would provide that, and I think we're getting to the stage where they're going to need to provide that. They have not shown any additional landscaping. I don't know that any is required.
Well, we discussed, I was going to,
Right.
Stu mentioned about that in a note to me, but we discussed that with Gary Thomasberger yesterday, and it's up to the board, but Gary and I were of the agreeing that no additional landscaping plan was needed. Any trees that were removed would be replaced, but no additional landscape plan would be
The
needed.
areas improvement are grass now, so
Right.
no substantial removal of
Right.
landscaping is proposed.
So,
And I think we were at the conclusion that nothing was required, but I
right,
just
so
want
we,
to note that for the
right,
board.
because it was only grass that's being,
As
and-
far,
yeah.
sorry, as far as lighting, there's not going to be any major change to lighting here. There's some parking being provided in the rear area, and there's a space between the two buildings which should be lit for security reasons, and also if they're going to have people there, especially in the winter when the sun's going down earlier, they should have some lighting there for the pedestrians, I guess students. Let's see, architectural review, this is subject to architectural review. You've seen something tonight on the plan, but this will be subject to ARB and public hearing on that, along with the site plan modification. We made some comments on the EAF. I'm not going to go on those, they're mostly typos unless the applicant or the board has any questions. And for the miscellaneous, there are some easements here that, I think there was an easement established at one time for sewer line that went under the building. The sewer, I'm guessing that the easement was established to provide a right, and then later on, the building came in and wanted to go here. They provided an alternative easement, but an alternative sewer line to the east of the building. But I'm not sure if that's in an easement, and I think that perhaps that easement should be developed and the other one should go away. So do you know if it's in an easement now?
As far as we can tell, the water line goes through this easement over here. The easement he's referring to is right here that runs through a building. We don't believe there's any utilities in that easement. Our survey team is looking into that to see if that may or may not have just been forgotten to be vacated after it was moved. So we can get an answer on that.
So if you could take a look into that, don't want to make your life more difficult than it is. Sometimes extinguishing an easement is difficult, but if you can do that, it would be better and cleaner for the future. It wouldn't raise these questions every time you come in. And I think, well, there's some comments on wetlands, just review that if you would, and pedestrian access. I think we've talked now about, you have a concrete walkway and you had stone coming up to it, but I think that's going to change based on the ESO meeting. Want to make sure, and the gravel is not going to go through, so you can have that walkway there. Your ADA access will be from the main parking lot, and that'll probably be along that paved area. And that's all I have. And their comments were provided by the Orange County Department of Planning, and they should be addressed by the applicant as necessary and considered by the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we did ask the applicant to touch base with the Village of Harriman, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and everyone's happy.
We will do so.
Thank you. Rick, thoughts, concerns?
Just a few. One is that I would ask that any easements that are in or near the improvement be sent to us so that we can review those. Secondly, with respect to seeker, the planning board can assume lead agency this evening. I would hold off on reviewing the Part 2 EAF that we submitted to you in April. I think we should probably get first something from the applicant on the mapper. There was designated that there was hazardous waste. I believe that that's probably Napera, but I would like to have something from the applicant indicating, representing that in fact they have looked into this as to why that would have been checked by the DEC on the mapper. And if in fact the only reasonable explanation is that it's Napera, then I think you can proceed.
Bless you.
God bless you. As we all know, the DEC mapper is not, although when you put in the property description, the section, block, and lot number, it will come up with various things that are checked or triggered by that, but it's not that specific that it actually includes only that piece of property or that property and others. It can be something that is generally found in and around the area, maybe actually miles away, that may trigger something in the mapper. So in order to get a more finite decision on that, I think the applicant should submit something to respond to the mapper check with respect to the hazardous waste. And then I think you can go through once you have that, you can go through the EAF and make your determination of significance. Public hearings required, as you know, for both, as Dennis said, for both the site plan as well as the ARB. Also, GML 239 referral is required. And when it comes time for the public hearing, whenever you set that, it will also require GML 239-NN notice to Harriman as an adjacent municipality to this for the public hearing purposes. And that's all I have.
Okay. So in April 18th, we made a motion, our intent to be lead agency. We also did an unlisted action at that time. That unlisted action, we're going to leave that alone for right now, right? Okay. With that being said, I'm going to offer a motion that we declare ourselves lead agency on this application. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Do you think we're ready to schedule a public hearing? With what we have? Or do you want to wait for a revised map to come in, Dennis? Because we're not going to have a July 4th meeting. I don't think anyone else wants to
You
be there.
can. The only thing is, at some point, we're going to have to get stormwater management from them, but it's generally not, well, in this particular instance, I don't think that you'll probably get a lot of public comment on that particular aspect, considering where this is. So yes, you can list the public hearing as soon as you feel comfortable. You're supposed to get the public comment as early as possible.
So our next meeting would be actually July 18th, because we're not going to be here for the 4th. I don't know anyone who wants to be here. Okay.
I thought Dennis was coming.
That's right, Dennis did say he was
I
coming.
volunteered last time, but I thought better of it.
All right, I'm going to offer a motion that we schedule a public hearing for July 18th. Do you think we're going to need a draft resolution, Rick? Yes, no?
Well, if you would like us to provide a draft resolution, we can. We will provide that with the assumption that the applicant will provide a sufficient response to the mapper designation so that you could continue on with seeker in that. So I'll assume all of that would occur for purposes of seeker, and I'll put that in the resolution. If things change, then you just change the resolution. There's no harm.
We'll make sure that we respond fully prior to your July meeting.
So probably by July 5th, Dennis, we would need the,
Just looking at that now. It's 2 weeks in advance of the meeting.
Yes.
so either the 3rd
Understood.
or the 3rd?
Yep.
The 5th, all right.
No, we will prepare a submission for the July
All right.
3rd meeting.
So my motion is to schedule a public hearing for July 18th and authorize the attorney to do a draft resolution of approval.
I second it.
Oh, we got
Oh,
2 seconds.
twins.
Woo. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So you have a couple weeks to get everything pulled together.
Yes, we will.
And for the public hearing, you're gonna have samples, we didn't,
It's R, I was going to say.
yeah, the ARB for it. Did you submit a form, our ARB form?
I didn't see it.
I don't see it. On the village website, there's a ARB form where it states what type of materials and colors. If you can
We
get
will-
that,
we
get that
will
into
include
it
that. Yep, we
sooner
will-
than later, and then just bring little samples with you so we can see the colors.
Understood.
All right?
Yes, thank you very much.
Anything else?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
Have a good night. I'm not throwing you out. It's been a long day. No, I wouldn't do that to you. We did have a 5th item on the agenda. Is anyone here for Pomona ARB? Going once, going twice, because I didn't get an official letter that they were not going to show up tonight. With that being said, do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second?
Second. Second, wow.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. I would like to wish everyone a happy 4th of July.